Buon pomeriggio.
Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Gianfranco Dell'Alfa, President of There Is No Peace Without Justice, and it is my greatest honor today to go with this event, thanking all of you for being here with us today for this meeting in between the European institutions, the European Union and all of its representatives, the United Nations, and the indigenous people of Brazil, all of us gathered in Brasilia. Today's agenda is a tight agenda, and I would like to thank you ever since now. And all of those who were facilitating the organization of the meeting, Eleonora Evi, Maria Arena, who are here with us, and thank the Special Rapporteur from the United Nations, Marco Sorellana and Jose Francisco Cali, and as well, I'd like to thank and greet, most of all of our friends in Brazil. All of them are gathered in Brasilia for the 18th edition of Acampamento Terra Livre, and this is the title of today's meeting, which is Getting Back Brazil. The purpose is that one now. Let me open a little parenthesis just to say that we have simultaneous translation in Italian, in Portuguese, and in English. And you just have to select your own channels and you'll get the translation. As I was saying, today's focus is the one of getting back Brazil. That could only be our theme in Brasilia. And the context, the political context, the current one, appear to be rather dangerous for indigenous people, and the presidential elections taking place on October the next will be a crucial moment, a key moment, which will define the future and the rights of indigenous people and the environmental safeguard and protection in Brazil. But I would say the Amazon at large. We well know that the elections to the detriment of indigenous populations and environment, especially under the administration of Bolsonaro, are growing, and they take place in the framework in a deliberately hostile policy aiming at the exploitation of the land and natural resources. This is why No Peace Without Justice, ever since 2019, together with the Peretti Foundation and our local partner, has been activating and starting a campaign against the deforestation of the Amazon and the protection of the rights of the indigenous people, and most of all, fight against the impunity which is favoring the accountable people for this deforestation, and want to be an active support to indigenous people also through the creation of a dialogue, a direct dialogue with the indigenous representatives, the European institutions, the European Parliament, the international institutions, the United Nations, and that's thanks to the guest that we will host and hear today. We would be very much happy if this meeting of ours could be a trigger of many more initiatives that will lead today's interlocutor, the ones gathered in Brasilia, once again in the appropriate international and European institutions that they visited a few years ago before the pandemic. It is with the greatest pleasure that we've brought to life this initiative, and the program now envisages the direct switch to our own Brazilian friends, but I've been told that Maria Arena asked us to please take the floor because she has to take part in an ongoing meeting, and so I'll pass the floor to Maria Arena, and then we will go on with
Grazie mille Gianfranco, grazie per aver organizzato questa iniziativa. Lo farò in inglese, se è possibile. I'm really pleased to be here with you today as the chair of the Human Rights Committee here at the European Parliament. You know that we are working on this issue of indigenous people in the Human Rights Subcommittee in the European Parliament, and I'm really pleased to be here also with Miguel, with whom we are working a lot in this European Parliament Committee. What I wanted to say is that we must build societies that reject all forms of discriminations and ensure the full respect and free exercise of everybody's human rights. We are totally aware in the European Parliament that indigenous people have suffered from historic injustice resulting from different things, colonization, but also systematic dispossession of land, territories, resources, and cultural heritage. And still today, we must be aware that European companies contribute to human rights abuses, land grabbing or deforestation, destroying biodiversity needed for survival of indigenous people. Very recently, I met with delegation of survivors from the Brumadinho disaster, where a failure from the German company which audited the dam led to millions of tons of toxic waste being released on the village and hundreds of victims. We understand at the European Parliament the urgent need to respect and promote your spiritual traditions, histories, philosophies, and worldviews. The invasion and exploitation of your lands can't continue to be permitted because we understand how it threatens your well-being, your rights, and your environment. The Brazilian government must comply with its international human rights obligation, including ILO Convention 169 and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and its constitution. According to Brazilian federal constitution, indigenous land are identified territories to guarantee indigenous people the right to their lands, livelihoods, and social organizations. Deforestation is a crucial environmental threat in the Amazon region. Deforestation leads to the destruction of habitat and depletion of species, causing soil erosion, reducing soil fertility, and impact water bodies. As consequences of deforestation, indigenous people also faces decreased natural resources for substances, such as animals, fish, fruits, trees, used for construction, but also for medicinal herbs. As stated in the UN Human Rights Council Resolution 41 and 21, the impact of climate change are already having a negative impact on the effective enjoyment of human rights. So it is important to work on it. Really, it is urgent for you, but for the health of this planet. In Brazil, the surveillance and protection of indigenous lands, environmental integrity are obligations of the states to limit illegal activities such as illegal logging, land grabbing, but also mining sector. In this line, removing invaders from indigenous territories is an essential legal measure to combat illegal activity within these lands, as well as supplying strong legal resources to combat impunity for these criminal activities. Deforestation, degradation, and conversion of world forests exacerbates the threat posed to indigenous people, local community who are victims of human rights violation. On average, more than 3 land and environment defenders were murdered each week in 2018, with more than 300 people killed in resources and land use conflict in the Amazon region, alone in the last decade. In May 2020, the European Parliament adopted a specific resolution on the effect of climate change on human rights and the role of environmental defenders. In this resolution, the Parliament called on the EU and its member states to strengthen the link between human rights and environmental through their external action and to act as a credible and reliable partner on the world stage by adopting legislation that integrates a comprehensive human rights-based approach to climate actions. We also are working on the due diligence for companies throughout their supply chain. And this is really important to be sure that companies, not only European ones, but worldwide companies, can be held accountable for the damage they are causing in your land. Because we are speaking about standards in Europe, but it is also important to guarantee that these standards are respected in your lands. And this is also a commitment that we have here at the European Parliament. So thank you, Gianfranco, and we will continue to work together for your rights, because your rights is also the future of this planet. Thank you.
Grazie. Grazie mille, Maria.
Many thanks, Maria. I did not introduce her as I should have. She is a member of European Parliament, but she's also the president of the Undercommittee for Human Rights of the European Parliament. She has an institutional, very important task, and what she said is equally important, also because of what she is representing at institutional level. Now, let me make a recommendation now. We have to stick to our time limits, the ones that were given to us, and we have to try and come to our conclusions by the end of 4:15, also because of the previous commitments all of us have undertaken. And now the word and the mic to Brasilia. Maurizio Terena will take the floor, and he will be the one who will moderate the session and pass the floor to all of our interlocutors. And recall and remember that we have only a given time limit to stay with and to live with. And now, over to you, Brasilia.
Ecco.
No início da campanha que ele fez, não falou que se ele for presidente, ele não ia ter marcado nem 1 centímetro de terra. Você lembra disso? Então, ele não é indígena. Então, as embaixadas e outras...
He says that the Bolsonaro president is trying to focus and funnel against us all of the fake information, thus allowing for the Marco Temporal clause so as to make impossible our stay on what was and what still is the property of our lands. And he is also putting at risk our own survival, our own life, our own nature. All of the indigenous people here gathered with us today, all of us, we should fight in order to have our rights acknowledged. We only want to live in peace. We want to live without having problems with our nature. We still want and ask that to protect our nature. We want it to be protected. The indigenous lands that haven't been landmarked yet, or the landmarking of which it has been eliminated, has to still go on. Now there is another person on the floor. I think he was João Casimiro from the Tapeba people. Let me thank you, says the speaker, for this opportunity. I'd like to thank all of the indigenous people who could make it here today to this huge gathering, international gathering, I would say. We truly want to allow the European Parliament, the United Nations representatives to know that we are thankful for the attention they give to us. We lead forward a kind of activity which is one of resistance, nothing else. It can be anything else. We endure, and I would like to recall and say that this is the struggle fought by my people. I was born in any such lands, in these lands, and I was already born when there was a resistance movement already existing. I did inherited this commitment, this resistance. So I would like to ask on this occasion for some attention, because all of our lands, the Caatinga, the Cerrado, and all of the Brazilian biomes have to be protected. The biomes have to be protected because otherwise we are at risk of extinction. And I would like to say that we lead forward a fight. This is our own struggle, which is made ever more difficult. There are so many activities that are brought into our own activities, damaging activities, activities that damage the land, the biodiversity, and nature itself is being threatened. We have to protect, we have to safeguard our land. We have to protect ourselves from power. Power only wants to destroy our lands. We have to allow for our own power to be in existence. We have to unite. And we should also lead forward our own fight. We have to fight, and we should give to this struggle the right value, the value it deserves. We want to protect and safeguard what was the activity, the knowledges and traditions of our own forefathers and ancestors. We can no longer tolerate the invasion of our own lands, this violence, the crime committed against our own territories, the abuse of the territories. This is why we need to be helped. We need your help. We are asking your help, your support. We ask the support of European institutions, of the United Nations representatives as well. And to try and come to a conclusion, let me say that, and let me recall that those who are having the power and who are in power do not know the truth and do not do the right things. Shouldn't be given for granted anyway, such a thing. We thank Casimiro do Nascimento Neto. And I would also like to recall to the leaders that because of the sound, the poor sound we have, we probably would have to speak with a lower tone of voice and keep the mic a little bit far away from our mouth, so not so close. And now, let me pass the floor to Eliesio Marubo, representing the Javari Valley and the Marubo population, the Marubo people. Our own people is settled in the Acre Rondonia area bordering with Peru. And I would like to thank the representatives of the European Parliament, because you are worried. You worry because of the climate change, and you say that you want to protect us, but unfortunately we know that you've been subsidizing some industries and activities that were detrimental to us, that damaged us. There are some responsibilities because of the killing of our brothers, the Yanomami brothers. You funded and subsidized the death taking place in our Amazon forest. We ask you to please be consistent, and we want you to truly protect us. I hope and I think that you are listening. You should no longer allow for the invasion of our lands, taking them away from us. That is not to be allowed, because that is where deforestation is taking place, just to allow for intensive cattle farming. Then you, the European, import this meat and the cattle, but children are being killed because of this. Part of nature has been destroyed in the name of your own subsistence and well-being. The FUNAI that should be protecting the indigenous people as well wasn't successful in protecting and safeguarding our rights. I beg you, I ask you to please exercise the right pressure with your own institutions so as to put an end to the invasion of our lands. And the Brazilian government is lying. You shouldn't believe what the authorities say. They are selling to you lies. You shouldn't believe all that's been said by them, by the ones at power. The climatic responsibility, the fact of taking upon themselves commitments aiming at the mitigation of the climatic changes, that's all a big lie. They are doing absolutely nothing. And you as well, are to be held accountable because you have some responsibilities. Our lands are the only guarantee allowing for climate to going back to what it was. This is a global lung. We are not asking you to protect our lands, but we are asking you to protect the entire planet, the United Nations as well. We've called on them, on its representatives. They have to take upon themselves responsibilities.
Falou representando a COIAB, Coordenação das Organizações Indígenas da Amazônia Brasileira, também da terra indígena Vale do Javari, né? A terra indígena com maior concentração de povos indígenas isolados de recente contato do mundo. Bom, seguindo a nossa programação, neste momento eu quero devolver a palavra para que...
Following with the programming and the agenda, I'd like now to pass again the floor to the moderators, the ones who have to moderate the entire event. Now, very well. I will take the floor then, maybe. Do we have any more contributions? We've seen we could make this meeting or event possible. We did login, we allowed for the connection, and we are in the very middle of a meeting where there are thousands of participants online, but also in presence. There are some technical messages, but I am convinced that the message we received, notwithstanding the great difficulties, was very sound, very strong, very clear. And from this point of view, I guess that we've heard it strongly and it was loudly said. Now, the floor goes to the European counterparts that have been addressed by the indigenous people and leaders. Let's get started with Eleonora Evi, Member of Parliament and member of the Environmental Committee of the Green Group with the European Parliament. She is the one who did help us organize this meeting, today's meeting. So special thanks to her. Eleonora, please take the floor. Thank you. Thank you, Gianfranco. And thank you to No Peace Without Justice. Thank you to all of you. Now, thank you for the fight for life. And that's also our own struggle. I would like to launch this message, made it clear and heard here in Europe, within the European Parliament. There are so many members of European Parliament and the political leaders who are tired of all this and who want to truly protect and safeguard your rights, because in the end, that's also our own rights. That means protecting, safeguarding the planet we live in. It is under the eyes of everybody that what is happening in Brazil, let's call it with the right name, let's call a spade a spade. This is a true genocide. It is a shame. The way, the surreptitious way, the incredible way through which things are led by, for example, introducing some legal tools, some artifacts, legal artifacts. Everything is done so as to steal away your lands, stealing the lands away from the people who have the ability, most of all, of protecting nature. We are confronted with a crisis, a climatic crisis, a biodiversity crisis of ecosystems as well, and let me say a social crisis as well, because we've lost the meaning of what it means to be mutually respectful, of having mutual care of all human living, and of protecting, safeguarding the health of all human people. I am shocked because of this shameful attempt by Bolsonaro to go on with this land grabbing and stealing, to give it to those who do intensive farming, mining, logging, all of this aiming at just getting profits. We have completely forgotten what it means to live in a balanced planet. So I do thank you from the deepest of our heart for your own struggle. Your fight is our fight. And in the European Parliament, we are leading forward a whole series of initiatives. I recently had the European Commission called upon for the themes and the protections that need to be protected and renewed. We have some regulations that prohibit products to be imported, products that cause deforestation. These rules will have to be strict, ambitious, because we can no longer allow for the exploitation system of the planet to go on. The depletion of nature, and most of all, the shameful attack against indigenous people cannot go on. So once again, thank you. Thank you from the deepest of my heart. And I would like to launch this message to make it heard, in order to understand that it is as if we were there together with you to demonstrate with you. Many thanks, Eleonora. That was a beautiful intervention. And you were very right in picking up on the criticism that was legitimately done to the European Union. And as such, you, as a member of the European Union and of the European Parliament, you rightly underlined how so many people within the European institutions are struggling and fighting for a change. Everyone is eager to give its own contribution to this struggle. And now the floor goes to Miguel Urban Crespo, Member of Parliament of the delegation of the European Parliament for the relations with Mercosur countries. Please, Miguel Urban Crespo, you take the floor. Many thanks for this kind invitation.
I am Miguel Urban, member of the European Parliament from the European left. As part of my activity in the delegation for relations with Brazil and Mercosur, I closely monitor the political and social situation in Brazil and the negotiation of the EU-Mercosur trade agreement. Last week, I was in Brazil. In the federal parliament in Brasilia, I participate in different activities connected with the discussion we are having today. For example, in the Parliamentary Committee of Human Rights, we exchanged on the potential impacts of the Mercosur trade agreement on the environment and indigenous communities. With other Brazilian MPs, we denounced the Bill 191/2020 and how it affects the rights of indigenous people. Finally, we supported the presentation of the legislative initiative of human rights and corporation. As you know, the negotiation of the EU-Mercosur trade agreement are already concluded, but the most important thing is missing, is ratification. That means we already have an opportunity to stop this agreement. The proposed agreement promotes a neo-colonial trade partnership that we can design as cause for cars, an agreement made for the profits of the elites and the multinational corporation, an agreement that benefits and the extractive economy and agribusiness, which is the real political basis of Bolsonaro. It's not by accident that after 20 years stuck, the negotiation have been concluded under the Bolsonaro government and a criminal against the indigenous communities and the environment and a champion of deforestation of the Amazon rainforest. This is the interlocutor and the agreement supported by the European Union. And as a member of European Parliament, I must say this is a shame. But this is also not compatible with the European compromise of climate change and the European formal support of the indigenous people. In the upcoming presidential election in Brazil, it's fundamental not only to defeat a criminal such of Bolsonaro, but also to defeat its commercial legacy. As a member of European Parliament, my compromise is to reject this agreement and to defend the rights of the people both in Europe and the Mercosur countries. This is the way of standing with you in this struggle. Our support to the indigenous movements and hasta la victoria siempre. Viva el Campamento Terra Libre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crespo. I think your message has been very well received in Brasilia, I am sure. Now, I have the pleasure to give the floor to Marcos Orellana, United Nations Special Rapporteur on toxics and human rights. And I know that his work is going to have to be ready very soon in this very month of April. So his intervention is particularly welcome today. Please, Mr. Orellana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and thank you to the organizers of this program. My name is Marcos Orellana, and I am the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. The UN Human Rights Council has given me this mandate to monitor and report on human rights violations and environmental injustices that result from exposure to hazardous substances and toxics. In 2020, I had the opportunity to report to the Human Rights Council about the country visit to Brazil that my predecessor conducted. At that meeting, at that session of the Human Rights Council, I reported that Brazil was among the first countries to secure environmental rights in its constitution, collectively enshrining the right to a healthy environment. But today, Brazil is on a steep path of regression from sustainability and human rights in violation of international law. The country is prioritizing development at any cost, and this is poisoning Brazil with toxics and hazardous wastes. Corporate crimes against indigenous peoples and workers are perpetrated with impunity. Pesticides are used as chemical weapons to drive indigenous communities from their lands, and this is alarming. Inflammatory rhetoric and failure to prosecute has flamed another epidemic, one of intimidation, attacks, and murder of human rights defenders. The situation in Brazil stands to spiral into not only a national catastrophe, but also one with phenomenal regional and global repercussions, including the destruction of our climate. In addition, I and other special rapporteurs are deeply concerned with Draft Bill 199/220. This draft bill would allow exploration and exploitation of mineral, hydropower, and hydrocarbon on indigenous peoples' lands. When the pandemic hit, the Bolsonaro government used the coronavirus crisis to weaken protections. Today, the Bolsonaro government again attempts to use a crisis, this time the Russian aggression against the Ukraine, to continue to weaken constitutional and legal protections afforded to indigenous peoples. Draft Bill 191 will generate major environmental degradation of indigenous lands. The extraction of fossil fuels and minerals produces massive volumes of pollution and toxic chemicals, including drilling fluids, selenium, arsenic, manganese, lead, iron, hydrogen sulfide, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, among other hazardous substances. This compromises the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, which was recognized at the global level for the first time by the Human Rights Council on October 8th of last year. And as it has been mentioned, this right to a healthy environment is enshrined in the Brazilian Constitution. As I mentioned, this presents a catastrophic risk for indigenous peoples living in the Amazon, but also for biodiversity and for other billions of people, as the Amazon forest is critical in supporting ecological balance and stable climate. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you to you. Thank you to you to this very important speech and very important subject you are looking for. And I am sure that your work will be very helpful for the indigenous people and for our common struggle. Now I give the floor to Mr. Jose Francisco Cali-Tzai, United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right of indigenous people. So perfectly very important intervention in front of the Acampamento Terra Libre. Please.
Good morning to all of you. Bon dia a todos. It is a pleasure to me, for me to address you today, and just to tell you also that I have a mandate from the Human Rights Council, which is based on the resolution 42/20, which requests the special rapporteur to examine ways and means of overcoming existing obstacles to the full and effective protection of the rights of indigenous peoples in conformity with her mandate, and to identify, exchange of, promote best practices. and also to gather requests, receive and exchange information and communications from all relevant sources, including government, indigenous peoples, and their communities and organizations on alleged violations of human rights in their territory and land. As you probably know more about the work of the Special Rapporteur, we have been doing a very strong work on the situation of Brazil. Last year, we have a very strong communication with the government of Brazil. Just to mention some of the communication that we have is the communication that we sent to Brazil on the allegation of systematic and structural discrimination against indigenous peoples that has been exacerbated due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and information on negative public representation of indigenous people, disproportional impact of COVID-19 on indigenous people, inadequate health infrastructure, and financial means. I have also send a communication on the bill number 191/2020, which is trying to regulate commercial mining in indigenous territories and land, and indigenous people will be have been not consulted prior to the activities, but there is something that, as you already know, also we send another communication on Brazil. In this communication, examine the Supreme Court extraordinary appeal number 1.01.165, the decision that will inform the national legal understanding of possession of land traditionally occupied by indigenous people. In this communication, the mandate gave its expert opinion on the interpretation of the constitutional framework on land rights, 1988 Brazilian Constitution, Article 231 and Article 20. And I can continue in all communication that I have been sending to the Brazilian government last year. And of course, I published a press release on the 23rd of August of 21, which also speak about the extraordinary appeal that I just explained. I've been very involved in all the situation of the Brazilian indigenous people since I was a member of the Committee for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and I've been aware of all the situation that indigenous people are living, especially the Yanomami people border from Peru, and other indigenous people who are living in the area. It's a very the Special Rapporteur is worried about the situation that the indigenous people are living in this moment, especially as my colleague Marcos Orellana was mentioning, the new bill that is trying to be passed by the Bolsonaro government. And I think that there is not any excuse to exploit the heart of the Amazonian in this moment. Either that is going to come a very extraordinary problems, energetic problems, but I think that there is in this moment, there is not any excuse. So I will be aware, I will be very with my open eyes in the situation of indigenous peoples, and you can count with me, please, honorable members of the European Parliament, you know that you can count with us, and we will be here ready for any action that you require. So thank you very much, Your Honor.
Grazie. Grazie mille.
Many thanks for this incredible contribution. And I believe that the presence of the two special rapporteurs is of great significance, together with the words spoken and the attention given to the incredible accountability that was given testimony of by the representatives of different political forces and MEPs. I believe that here, from the European cities, from the European Union, from the European institutions, we can send out this message, a message of great attention, of great willingness to work with you, to be fighting side by side with you. There is an incredible fight, a battle to be fought before the end of October, and let's hope that the conclusions of the elections are going to be favorable to the cause we are fighting for. And I also believe that I can interpret what you have heard by saying that if you want to come, and if you may wish to personally come and meet the institutional European representatives, there will be a very favorable ground to do that in order to send out messages by means of parliamentary texts, political texts, not only through the special rapporteurs, in other words. And I believe that it is more than right, before coming to the conclusion, to send back the floor to Brasilia, because you should end this event. We were very good. I believe we were sticking to the timetable, but you now have a few more moments available to you. And please remember to speak with the mic well positioned so that your words will be audible and understood. Meanwhile, let me thank you, let me greet you. I now say over to you. You will end the event.
Informar que a PIB, juntamente com suas organizações regionais, estarão enviando relatório para que vocês possam ter acesso também às informações e às violações.
Now, so as to inform you, we will refer and relate everything. We will provide all written communications, a written report will be sent out. And we do truly hope that we will be in a position of exchanging materials, leading forward all of our contacts. We still have some leaders that could not take the floor till now. And we would like 3 of them to please take the floor, if you allow. They will have, each one of them, 3 minutes time allocated. And I would also now like to invite one of the leaders coming from the Maranhão state. Hello, everybody. I believe that what he just spoke is a greeting in an indigenous language. We are here and we fight together, hand in hand. We are here united, gathered, where my village is inside a reserve. I would like to see that still exist. It's only us, the indigenous people, who may protect that and defend it and fight for it. And instead, there are so many businesses and companies who'd like to lay their hands on our lands and thus destroy them. There are landowners who have no respect with respect to us. They do not respect us. This is the reason why we have a strong duty, and the duty is the one of keep fighting. They do not respect us. They do not respect us as human beings. They do not respect our human nature, nor our lands or rights. They are worried of their own work. That's all they worry about, of making money, getting profits. That's what they worry about. But we are rather interested in fighting in order to safeguard and protect what our ancestors left behind. And we've said it, be careful because you're playing with fire. You don't know the forest the way we do. And the indigenous fire may be very dangerous. It is us who know all plants, biodiversity at large. We are the ones who always took care of this, of the environment. The Bolsonaro government has to come to an end. It has to leave. It's got to be ousted. Unfortunately, the voice has been lost, so we couldn't translate what he was saying. The sound is muffled. We do not hear any more clear words spoken by this indigenous representative. We are awfully sorry for that. And he's now repeating the government of Bolsonaro has to end. He says fora Bolsonaro, which means out with Bolsonaro. He's got to be ousted. This is what he is repeating. And I would like to thank those who support us and protect us and safeguard and fight for our own rights. I wonder whether we can hear this intervention, because otherwise maybe we could end the connection. And now the Rondonia land and state will take the floor. Incredible diversity. We are witnessing this incredible diversity, he says. As a mother, I feel the need to thank for what was done as a mother and as a woman. All of us, mothers, women that are always constantly worrying about the family, the protection of the nest and the home, or our own homes and places. I would like to denounce and say that our territories have been polluted by now by chemicals that we didn't know before. They poisoned us. They poisoned the land. There are people who are part of our own people who still carry on with their own activities, but whenever they fish, that fish is polluted. The fish they were used to eating for generations, and we die because of being poisoned.
Ele não acabou, aonde já morreu muita população indígena, não só os indígenas, como os brancos também. Eu sei que tem muito branco que nos apoia, aonde eles sofrem junto com a gente, né? E nós pedimos, né?
I do know that those who suffer those who suffer are not just representing indigenous people. There are so many whites, Caucasians that live in uncontaminated areas that also are the victims of this poisoning. I would have liked to say many more things, but what I really feel is the urge to show that all of us, indigenous women, are ready to fight, ready to go on, ready to resist, to oppose. We cannot leave our lands, the lands where we were born and where our ancestors were born. And now I'll leave the floor to another speaker, another leader. Thousand thanks. I believe that the mobilization in that camp goes on, the Acampamento Tierra Libre. We have heard this very strong appeal, a very touching one, something that touches deep chords in our hearts and souls and minds as to the mobilization that needs to be conducted. I would like to thank you deeply for having participated, for following this meeting. And as we've heard, there is the idea of bringing to our attention a document with proposals, and we will stay in contact. We will treasure those proposals and give all our attention to it. So now, thank you to all of those who have been participating, and we would like to thank all of you. Many thanks again, and unfortunately, we have to end this connection.